The village was agog with Harold Jones is coming home, you see. Right, this was on a Monday morning. So everyone was going to go out to meet Harold, you see, and give him a reception at the station. Well, unfortunately, Harold beat us to it, didn't he? He came home on the mail train in the morning.
They were expecting me at night.
Anyway, Harold came home, and you know what it is like in London and village. One goes out to tell the other, doesn't it? And it goes round like wildfire, doesn't it? It's like when somebody dies, everybody knows, don't they? That night, the whole village erupted, didn't they? We had a little brass band, which I was a member of. Oh, I played the E-flat. The E-flat.
Well, the first thing I knew was this car pulling up for me, and all these people on the ropes to haul me around the village. They took me up every blooming road in London, and I think, with me out through the sunshine roof.
I can see Hal there now, sitting on the back of that old car, smiling away there at everybody, you know, and I suppose wondering what it was all about, too. Had no idea there would be anything like that for him. But it was still Harold underneath, and his smile. Yes, oh no. It was very, very good.
I think it was David Busnum who was driving the car, the postmaster at the time. They're all dead, him and his wife, and it was very, very touching, you know, and especially me, because I'm a little bit tender-hearted myself. I shall never forget my mother, poor old dear. In particular, she was overwhelmed. So am I too. She had cancer anyway at the time, and she only lived until she saw me home. And I think she was quite happy to die then, because she was in terrific pain.
But you weren't in very good health, were you?
No.
He looked quite poorly when I first met him. Very poorly. I thought he needed feeding up. So.
Oh, she was lovely in those days. Well, she's still lovely.
Well, thank you very much. Well, oh dear, what a thing to say.
She had lovely, natural, wavy hair.
Well, I was young then, Harold.
Well, I know you're young, but your hair's not so good now.
Oh, dear. I think I was the only one to put up with him, to tell you the truth.
That's what you say.
Well.
There were others in Harold Jones's village of Llandinum whose lives would be turned upside down by the end of the war. The evacuees. Dolores and Bill Shaw had left their mother behind in Merseyside 6 years before, at the start of the war.
I was taken round by a lady with short dark hair from house to house to get people to take me, and nobody would have me. So I went to this one place, and an older lady said she'd keep me for the night till they found somewhere, and I was there till the end of the war. I stayed with her all that time. They ate separate. Of a night, he always had bread and milk and a piece of cheese. And he used to salt his bread and milk. And I always stood alongside him. And he'd eat his bread and milk. And then I'd get a piece of cheese off him. And then I could take his plate out. And I loved that. And I waited and waited for that piece of cheese. I didn't have friends there. I was basically on my own. There was 2 children next door. Like all children, they were very cruel. And one time they decided I could play with them up at the back of the cottages. And they said to me to come and look at this thing, and they lifted the grid, and as I leant over with my fingers, they let the grid go. and I had my hands caught, and there was 2 German prisoners working up the back, heard me and come running, took me home. And another time they pushed me in a bed of nettles.
Well, myself, I got on all right because thinking back, I was sort of a loner. And when Mrs. Meddins and Mr. Meddins picked me to go and live with them, they had this huge farm and I had all this land to roam around. So I didn't actually have any interest in other children apart from going to school. The Welsh lads taught me a trick with the chickens. If you get the chicken and you get a piece of white chalk, I don't know whether you know anything about this, and put the head down on the floor and then put a piece of run the white chalk away from his head and let go of his head slow. The chicken will stay with his head on the floor. Now, we used to go to different places and do this and leave all the chickens, you know, they were like hypnotised with the line going off them. Yeah, but they knew who it was. Oh, it's that Billy Shaw, the evacuee, you know. He's been round here again. You go into the house in the summer, it had freshness to it. You could keep bread, say a month, and there was no sign of mould on it. They were very thrifty, the Meddins. So when you got a slice of bread, you could see daylight through it. Lovely people they were.
Oh, Sam was a tall gentleman, rather introverted, I would say. And actually, I don't know whether I should say this, but we used to have a nickname for him called Necky because he had, I suppose, quite a long neck. This is what the naughty children, you know, we had our name for him.
Mrs. Meddins, she was a charming lady. Oh, very smart. Always in navy. Always in navy costume and navy hat.
Well, she used to be able to put them on at all angles. And I think that when we would have these sort of Women's Institute, of course, that was, I think she could be quite a laugh then because she could wear these various hats and back to front, sideways on, and they always looked right. She had what I would call a hat face.
I used to walk from Llandinham back to the farm on my own. I don't know, it must be about 3 or 4 miles, I should imagine. Sometimes it'd take me 2 hours. You know, I'd just mess about. He had one labourer working for him, old Bill. He only had one tooth, and that was in the middle on the top, and it was funny, you know, watching him eat. I think she used to give him stringy bacon, you know, just to annoy him. They're the sort of things you never forget. Gypsies. I got quite friendly with them in the end. They were lovely, you know. The women wore these flared dresses, black with flowers on, and they all had the bangles on their arm, like Ava Gardner in that film. You know, you can't buy that sort of thing, can you? You see it in paintings, you think, oh, that's lovely. But I've actually lived those paintings, you know. To me, they are paintings. Paintings in my mind. Just there, the front door was, yeah. Because that was my room up there on the gable end. How do you do? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name's Billy Shaw, this is my wife Winnie.
Hello. Hello.
I used to live here with Mr. and Mrs. Meddins.
Did you
during the
really?
war. Brings back memories, this coming up these
Yes, I'm
days.
sure it does. Which was your bedroom?
The end one,
This one.
yeah.
Right, come and have a look at it, see if it's altered then.
Oh yeah.
Where was
a
your
lot.
bed?
My bed was here, and
Yes.
that door went down into the kitchen.
The stairs is
The
gone. The stairs is gone.
The things that happen when you leave a place.
That's our airing cupboard now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I've had this house in my mind all these years.
Go have you.
And you've gone and ruined it on me.
The Meddins had a daughter, Joan. Well, I suppose she looked more like her father than her mother. She didn't take on her mother's sort of very pretty looks.
She was a very wholesome girl.
Wholesome, roomy was your favourite word.
When she used to come home for the holidays from Bangor College, I looked at her as a sister, but she didn't look at me as a brother. It was just this thing she had about me. She didn't want me part of their family.
This is Joan's room.
She didn't allow me to come in. Yeah. So this way, Joe.
This is where
Done
Joan
everything.
slept. Yes.
Because I go in the room and sit on the bed and think, well, you're not here, you can't send me out, you know. She used to leave a violin in there, and she used to say to me, don't you ever touch any of my things. It was something she had against me, you know.
Oh.
And when she used to go out, I used to go in her room and get the violin out.
Did you have a go at it?
I couldn't play it, but I used to have a good noise. The atmosphere in this house is exactly the same as the atmosphere in my own house.
Is it really?
In Bebbington.
Yes.
It is, honest. I feel part of this house. I
But
know
if-
it's funny to say that, but I do. It is a happy house, isn't it?
Yes, it's still happy.
for you.
Yes, it
yeah,
is.
Yeah.
We actually spent many happy years here.
Well, if I'd have had the money, you wouldn't have done. I'd have bought it. Definitely. I've tried and tried, but I can never remember ever leaving. That particular day, it's just blanked out of me memory.
We were all back together. And it was as if you'd never been anywhere. You were back in the house and back as a family, and that was it. Except for me, because I spoke terrible. Well, I spoke a lot of Welsh, and my accent was so Welsh, it was unbelievable. And I used to get really, really cross because nobody understood.
I'd had all this freedom, and then I come home and all of a sudden all this freedom stopped. You can't go there, you can't do this, you know.
He was a very lovable child, but he was a sod. I'm afraid he was one sod. My mother used to have to drag him to school with a big tide mark because he wouldn't wash himself. When he went to bed, he used to get in between blankets. He would never get in the
How
sheets.
did you know that?
That's right, because we told Winnie when you got married, try and get him into sheets because he won't sleep in them.
To sum it up in one word, I think I was a nuisance. An actual nuisance and a pest. 2 words, that is. It was just too many people talking to me all the time. Even now, I can do without people. At sea, I'd say I was a loner. Like I had my own cabin with being the carpenter, ship's carpenter. And I don't think, I had 2 ships where I had to share a room with somebody else, and I hated it.
I think we had a very close family. 2 brothers and my sister and myself, with Mum and Dad. She just used to dance. Remember one record, Mr. Callahan, when that was out? And she'd dance over the furniture. You know, like you'd see in a film. Arms out, dress up, and we loved it. And when Dad was home, he'd join in.
I remember my mum asking me to go up to the bedroom to get a clean tablecloth out of the dressing table. And when I pulled some of the clothes back, I seen 6 bullets and a gun. Do you ever remember that?
Yeah.
I seen, and they were laid out, the 6 bullets and the gun in a holster. I don't know, the gun was about that big, I don't know what it was.
38.
I didn't touch them, took the tablecloth down to me mum And she said, well, it was at the time of the invasion. My dad, if the Germans had have actually invaded England, he was going to shoot us all, because he had 6 bullets for each of us.
I remember that.
That was the 4 children and my mum and dad. And I was very upset about it. And I never seen them again. I don't know what happened to them.
I do.
Well, I never seen them again.
He took them to sea with him.
Did he?
And threw him over the side.
I was very upset when I seen that. We were only young, and how could my father shoot us?
Well, he would have shot himself as well. He wouldn't have thought twice about it.
No, he wouldn't have done.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's what he was going to do. Well, that's the type of man he was.
Yeah.
I suppose we were lucky
Yeah.
that you didn't load it and shoot us.
Well, I did pull the trigger a few times. He was one of them fellas, you know, he'd let you have it. I mean, I got it off him loads of times, you know. It wasn't just the back of the hand, it was elasticated chest expander. But I still love him, like, you know, for all that. That's the way he was brought up, and he brought us up. And it's just worked the opposite with us. Our own children, we can't do enough for them. You know, I'd give them anything in the world they wanted, if I could give it them. It's still very strong, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Meddins. Because I speak of them as though they're still there, you know, as though I've only just, say, been there last weekend or something like that. They're that real to me all the time. But my mum and dad is just as real to me. So I'm splitting between the two of them. I just can't decide who is my real mother.
You were never allowed in this room, were you, Bob?
No, never. It was like, I don't know, somewhere special Mrs. Meddins kept just for visitors. It's not very often that Sam Meddins used to come in, I don't think.
Wasn't it?
No.
No. So you're the visitor today?
I'm the visitor today. Yeah. I can't see any further than the edge of Llandinham. That's like the end of the world to me. Llandinham is where I belong. All the roads finish there. And I often say to Wyn when we're coming back home here, although I love it here, this is a happy house to us. It's as though the road rolls up as we're leaving. And it's laid out again when we want to go out there. That's the way I look at it.
Summit of Snowdon, the first day of peace. 2 out-of-step soldier lads seeking release. A foretaste of freedom to rest or to roam, and the height of ambition to say, coming home. In the mountain-top grandeur, what exhilaration! Transcending the world in unique celebration. And 50 years later, I still catch the thrill of peace, perfect peace, and time standing still.
On VE Day, Private Arnold Kellett and his friend Cohen found themselves stationed in North Wales. They wanted to mark the occasion by doing something more significant than going out dancing and getting drunk. They decided to climb to the summit of Snowdon.
I've always retained this sense of something transcendent, something that this had been like this on Snowdon all the time throughout the war. You see, it's above the sort of petty affairs of humanity. I was a scout and she was a guide. That's when we first got to know each other. She was only 15, but I decided she was going to be the one, you know. I think the thing that brought us together actually is, oddly enough, it's this manuscript here. For the Whipsey Methodist Scouts, I wrote it was a 2-hour play, wasn't it, a comedy, called The Ghost of Dr. Pym. And this was in the war years, and it was full of Nazis and spies and so on. And it was an absolute riot. And this is my version of it here, and very sort of neat but rather sort of copperplate type handwriting. And Pat kindly typed out the whole of it for me, the whole 2 hours of this play. And that's the first typing she did, and she's still typing for me, aren't you? Everything I write, and I've written quite a lot of stuff, she always types.
Well, he was a very nice boy, very, very pleasant, and I don't know, there was just something about him that attracted me. The night before he went away, we went for a walk, and he brought me back home as usual, and we stood under the gas lamp up the street, and for quite a while, and then eventually we said, right, you know, goodbye, and kissed each other, and, you know, tears. And, that was it. No, I didn't go to the station. My father went, and his father went.
I'm sure you were there for that. And I can't remember the actual goodbye because I just couldn't, you know, I couldn't bear to think about it.
No, I didn't go to the station. You went with your dad and my dad.
No, we're talking about the end of the embarkation leave, don't you?
Oh.
You had 14 days embarkation leave, but at the end of that, when you had to say goodbye to your family and to your girl, it was like being, you know, like an amputation, as I remember. It was horrible.
Yeah, we were very much in love, actually. You know, it was it was our whole life, really. And of course, then I used to write and tell Arnold what I'd been doing. I remember cycling to a little church called Coley Church one Sunday afternoon, and I sat in this church with nobody else there at all, and I wrote him a letter and told him how I was missing him and wish he could be home, and then cycled back home again.
I burnt them every so often. I didn't want them to fall into the wrong hands, as it were. You know, they were very personal. And I think being away brought me closer to my roots in Yorkshire. Exile, like any form of absence, makes the heart grow fonder. And whereas I was so interested in life in the Far East, I was coming closer and closer to my roots back home. And my letters are full of longing, not merely to be back with Pat, but to be back in Yorkshire. I mean, there's no joy like coming home. It's the only reason you travel, I think, for the pleasure of coming back home.
Well, we'd been looking forward to it so much. We thought it would never really happen.
I remember my father meeting me at the station. Now, he was a lively character with a wonderful sense of humour, but he was rather strict, and he wasn't in any way demonstrative. And yet I'll never forget the way he hugged me. He'd never hugged me before, not like that anyway. And I think that in that hug there was just something of the memory of his brother being killed at the age of 22 in the First World War, which then was still only 30 years away, you see. And he was so glad to have me back home. And then we arrived at the home in Wibsey, and I remember my mother was literally speechless with emotion. She just couldn't say anything. She was so glad to have me back. You know, I didn't realise I was so loved. You don't. You take these things for granted. Pat was waiting for me in another room, almost as though she was in Purdah, you see, and I went up and had a wash and brush up.
Washed and brushed up.
And I sat there on the settee and I was really nervous, you know. I thought, oh dear, well, what will he look like after all this time?
Right, you're waiting for me, Pat. And I came in 50 years ago, and there you rose from the couch. Oh, yes.
I didn't know what to say. And then everything sort of became all right again, and it was as though really had not been away. We were a bit sort of strange with each other at first, you know. We sort of had a kiss and a cuddle and said how lovely it was for him to be back. And we had a sort of chat a bit, and then we went into the other room, we all had a meal.
And so we embraced and we sat on the couch where we listened to records and all that sort of thing. And I don't know what she remembers of it, but it was the kind of thing, just like the deepest traumas and the most anguished times, something is blotted out. Perhaps the most blissful things are also, you know, buried deep in the subconscious somewhere. But it was very good indeed to be back home. You were walking on air or something, weren't you?
Oh, yes, I was absolutely... I couldn't believe it. In fact, I hardly slept a wink the night, I remember.
Yeah.
It was going over and over in my mind all the time, you know. As it really happened.
You hardly slept a wink, and you certainly didn't sleep with me, and we didn't sleep together until we were married, which was another 4 or 5 years. Every time Pat and I said goodbye at the end of a leave, we used to play the overture to the Crown Diamonds by Aubert. And ever since then, at our wedding anniversary, we've always played the Crown Diamonds. Well, I'm the more sentimental of the two, and I persuade Pat, or the more romantic of the two would be a better way of putting it. I persuade Pat to put on her wedding dress.
You didn't have to persuade me for quite a few years.
Oh, a few
years.
It
wasn't until sort of quite recently that I began to think, oh dear, you know.
Well, you could still get into it, which is more than a lot of ladies can, you know, after 40 years. But she wore it on the anniversary, our Ruby wedding anniversary last year, didn't you? And you said it was going to be the last time then.
Well, it's rather worse for wear, really. I managed to get a coffee stain down the front of it once, and it's getting decidedly torn. So I'm afraid I'm just going to have to pension it off after this year and put it away in a box. But it's I've had my money's worth out of it, I think.
Pat, I think, has fulfilled herself far more than I have in having children and then, as it were, vicariously seeing more children in her grandchildren. And that must be very satisfying to a woman. In a way, it's not quite the same for a man.
Your grandchildren.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they were part of you, weren't they? They were part of you physically, the children, and it's never the same for a man. That was Strindberg's point, wasn't it, in one of his plays, I think. The youngest, the boy, he was learning classical trumpet at the Royal Northern College in Manchester, and then he was asked to join Simply Red by Mick Hucknall. At our Ruby wedding last year, I presented her with this little locket, which contains the poem Absence, which was written on the back of the photograph I carried around with me in Malaya. Who loves a mistress of such quality? His mind hath found affection's ground, beyond time, place, and mortality. To hearts that cannot vary, absence is presence, time doth tarry.
I saw him in the church. And I thought I liked the look of him. But I liked the look of the man with the black hair as well. But I'm glad I didn't marry him. He married and never had any children. Never had any children. But I was greedy, I had 6.
I know what he's playing at.
They're all good kids. They haven't been an ounce of trouble to me. Not an ounce. I'm 91. I'm a very lucky woman. You took my trousers down. You took my blooming trousers down, you did. That picture on the wall up there's nice, isn't it? That was Will. He was a gentleman. People used to tell me that. Wilf was called up to do active service in France, and he wrote and said, if the baby is a girl, will you call it Charmaine? Because he was billeted with a family that had got the same number of children as we had and got a daughter called Charmaine. And I said to a friend of mine, Rena, I'm not going to call her Charmaine, I'm not. Well, it came to the dedication, we call it dedication in the Salvation Army. And Rena was there to be her godmother, and she said, are you going to call her Charmaine? I said, no. No. And she said, well, Wilf is in France, and let's hope he'll come back again. But if it so happened that he didn't, you won't have granted him his last wish. So that set me off crying. The congregation all cried, the bandsmen all cried, and we all cried on the platform, just because Rena had said that to me. So he called a Charmaine, and it cost me a bob to have the name put on the register. Cost me a bloomin' shilling. Anyway, she won't use the name. She won't use the name, will you?
I started to say, my daddy's coming home for my birthday. Mother used to say, he will be coming home soon, but we don't know that it will be on your birthday. And I said, he will. He's coming home on my birthday.
And he turned up on her birthday at 2 o'clock in the morning. I met him on Ely Station of her birthday. And everywhere was pitch dark. Everywhere was pitch dark. And I heard some footsteps coming up the platform, and I thought, that's Wilf. Went to meet this man, flung my arms round his neck, and if it had been a black man, he'd have had a jolly nice kiss. That was Wilf. Wilf. When we went to get in the car, the man said, come and sit by me, Mr. Turner. He said, I'll sit by my wife.
I can remember coming down the stairs of that morning because the stairs opened directly. It was one of those little staircases with the door at the bottom, and the door opened into the living room. And there was this man sitting there, who is my daddy. And a number of people sort of ran watching, waiting for my reaction, but I was not at all surprised because I knew that my daddy would be home for my birthday.
One of the children came in and said, there's a lady outside in a car, wants to see you, Mum. And I went out, and it was Mrs. Colonel Pratt from the big house in the town. And she said, I won't come in to see your husband. I shall be seeing him, but I've come to tell you that you deserve to be the first woman to have her husband home. And I said, well, why are you saying that to me? You don't know anything about me. She said, you'd be surprised what I know about you. I don't know what she meant. And I thanked her, and she went. When we used to go out for walks in the town, women would come up to him and kiss him and carry on with him. We had a sounding alley. It went from our street down into the main street, and it was only about that width, with walls each side. And we walked down there, and 2 women come up to him and, oh, it's lovely to see you home, Wilf, and kissing him. And I got fed up with it. He never talked about his days in the camp. He never told me that he was stood up against the wall to be shot. They told him to take his boots off. This is Fred Watson. You don't know Fred Watson. Do you know Fred Watson? Fred Watson told me this story. They told him to take his boots off, and he refused to take them off. And they stood him up against the wall to shoot him. And he said, he told Fred and them after, he said, I thought about my wife and 5 children in England, so he took his boots off. Well then, life went on, and we had a good many happy years together. very happy years together with my big family.
We were more like companions than mother and daughter. We used to go to the local cinema and eat our tea in there so that we were home before the sirens went. There was this marvellous Technicolor film, and one of the things that they showed was a slice of fried bread bubbling in a frying pan. And someone took a chunk out of the middle of this piece of bread and dropped an egg in it to fry. And the whole cinema audience said, "Oh," because eggs were really, they were a luxury. And to see this bubbling there, everyone could have eaten it there and then.
I think the war probably did me a huge favour in happening, because I had two people in my life, my brother and my grandfather, who gave me unconditional love. My father was away. My mother always claimed that he was a captain, and that at some point he'd gone to Egypt and he'd committed the crime of taking the veil from an Egyptian woman's face, and because of this he had been demoted down. I suspect that there is no truth in that at all. My most vivid memories of my childhood are with my brother and my grandfather. I only have to get near to Winsiet to remember my grandfather, because you'd crawl into bed with him, and he always wore Winsiet pyjamas, and he was a big man with lots of folds of flesh. I used to wriggle into bed with him and eat digestive biscuits. During that period, it was a very happy time for me.
I was a daddy's girl. I loved my daddy, and we were very close. We had his photograph on the wall. We had a special photograph taken of him in his uniform. I do remember looking at the photograph and thinking, will he ever come home? Will I ever see him again? And wondering. We didn't know he was coming. And I was coming home from school, and I was walking down Guide Bridge, which was near home. And a girl ran up to me and she said, "Marjorie, your dad's come home." And I flew the rest of the way with my school bag flapping, and my knees went to jelly, and I couldn't run anymore. I had to slow down, and I got round the corner of the street, and he was out in the street with the neighbours in his uniform, and I flew down the street, and he picked me up and hugged me. It was lovely, and I cried and he cried. But I was very mixed up in my feelings. Fancy going away, leaving a little girl of 10 and coming back to a 14-year-old girl. And of course my mother and I had a very strong partnership, and the poor man, I think, felt pushed out.
When he arrived, I didn't know who the hell he was. You know, this strange man walked in and started sleeping in the same bed as my mother and, you know, sat down at the table with us, and I was very resentful of it, very resentful. He was a bully. Physically, he was quite a violent man. And I mean, his hits weren't just taps, they were hard, they hurt. He liked to enforce his will, and it was important to him that he did so. Almost immediately, my grandfather left and went into what was then called the workhouse, what would now be called a residential home. My brother left home shortly after his return, went off to Naval College. So my world fell apart.
He looked so different. I used to look at the photograph that we had and think, where's my dad gone? And he was going deaf. He said that he had things going on in his head. He had cars revving, he had organ tunes, trains whistling, he had pop songs going through his head he didn't even know he knew. It got more and more difficult as the years went on. When my mother died, he was distraught. He didn't know what to do, and his life, I think, had really ended when my mother died. He lived for another 3 years, was very ill, had a cancer on his face, which was a terrible thing. He lost chunks of his face. So this handsome young man of the photograph, you know, in his uniform, just was a person of the past.
The day he died, I was with him, and he was struggling to breathe. And he said at one point, "I'm sorry." And I thought that this was some, I don't know, some point of contact he was trying to make with me. And I took hold of his hand and I said, "What are you sorry for?" And he said, "I'm sorry, I can't speak very well." And, you know, there was a sort of mixture of wanting to laugh and wanting to cry that I'd sort of expected, this sort of deathbed reconciliation between daughter and father, and having misunderstood, mistranslated the situation totally. And that was a sort of farcical bit about it. But a huge sadness also was there, that right up until the end, we weren't able really to come together.
We wanted him to go into sheltered accommodation when my mother died, and he wouldn't. He said, "No, I started my life off on this street and I'll finish it here." And that was one of his stubborn streaks, you see. He wouldn't be moved from that. We had a place for him in a hospice. He wouldn't take that for a long time, until one day he collapsed on the postman, and the neighbours got the ambulance, took him up to casualty. So he went into the hospice and he kept telling everyone, "I'm just going in for 3 weeks until I feel better." But after a week he died. I felt a great love for him, and I was glad he died peacefully. He didn't deserve the cancer, but nobody ever does. I was glad that he didn't outlive my mother too long. I was glad my mother didn't live to see the way he died, because they had a very close relationship, a happy marriage in spite of ups and downs.
In September 1939, Frank, Jim and Bob Burns were evacuated from their tenement flat in Poplar, the heart of London's East End. They had no idea where they might end up.
It was part of an adventure. Gradually it was getting greener and greener, and we started seeing haystacks and cows, and oh, this is great.
And then we ended up Oxford, and off we went through these country lanes, and it was getting dark, very dark. And I remember the trees scratching this double-decker bus in these country lanes, and getting very frightening.
Never seen rabbits before, and on the left-hand side there was hundreds of rabbits, all their white tails, all bobbing.
All them rabbits, wasn't it? Remember the rabbits? Hundreds of rabbits. When we get into Wytham Village, the village hall, there's some women waiting for us.
No, but you couldn't see the rabbits because it was dark.
No, the rabbits aren't in there. You could see them running around.
It was dark.
No, your memories are wrong.
And all these bats was flying, and there we were being sort of marshalled through the village lane round, and Bobby's saying, "Where are we going? Where are we going? Where are you taking us? Where are you taking us?" And he said, "Oh, you'll be all right. We're taking you to the Abbey." And Bobby says, "We ain't living in no Abbey." No, he said, "No." He said, "You're going to be all right, don't worry." And we went up these wooden stairs, and there was a great big white swing door. He pushed it open, and there was all these maids in maroon and white pinafores and white bonnets. And then they all came circling round, looking at us, you know, like something from outer space. You imagine coming from... Christ almighty.
take us out of the bedroom, and there's 4 beds. So she said, well, what bed do you want? No, we all sleep in one bed. So she said, Miss George said, well, all you and our other brothers and that. Well, you've got other brothers, got 3 other brothers and a sister.
Well, it was something you knew in nursery books, you know. I mean, it's sheets, I mean, pillars, white pillars and white sheets. It was really marvellous, yeah. It's a lovely feeling, yeah. Yeah, it's really something that you'll never forget, yeah. I think I was the first one awake. I heard this terrible screaming. Terrible screams. And I shouted to Bobby and he said, well, go and have a look. And the windows was all wooden shuttered and I opened them up and out there, lawns and fir trees and these massive birds. And I shouted out, there's bleeding eagles. And he said, where? And he got out of bed and had a look. He said, God, bleeding, loads of them. Anyway, this woman said, no. She said, they're peacocks.
The sun was shining through, and as the sun shines through the leaves, the tree, it was making like effect of water on the wall, you know, all shimmering, you know. And when we looked out the window, wonderland, wasn't it?
We opened the window and the smell. It's beautiful. It was warm, oily, mossy, musky. It's all wafted sort of. As you turned your head and, you know, it was all pushing and shoving at the window, and each turn, every sort of time you moved, another wave of it would come.
And we done a bit of exploring. This little stream, crystal clear, all the minnows. Took our socks and shoes off, rolled our trousers up and paddled across, and the fish, I mean, this was all like music, you know, the fish was nibbling at our legs like, you know, beautiful.
Then we threw this little gate in a grey wall, and there was a pen, all massive, with deep grass, and we got in there, and he said, the wallabies in here. We didn't know what a wallaby was, so Bobby said, we can't see it. He said, well, if you spread out and we all go up that way, we'll get it to the end of the fence and it must jump and you'll see it. And that's what we've done. We all spread out and we all went through this grass. You know. I mean, I was only top or covered grass. And all of a sudden I heard this ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. And this big thing went right over my head. This big one. Oh dear. Screams. They belonged to the people that own the Abbey, Colonel Fennell and his wife Hope Fennell, ex-South African I think it was. I think it's German origins there somewhere. They lived on the other side of the house. Meeting them was very rare, you know, you kept your place like upstairs and downstairs sort of thing, you know. And the sorrowful part was that they had just lost their daughter a couple of weeks before we arrived. You know, their house was in sort of a mourning, but we didn't know at the time, you know.
Well, she must have died in the...
We
was doing September.
Yeah, just before.
2 weeks before him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said there was flowers on the grave.
There were still flowers on the grave.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
She died 2 weeks before we got there.
Yeah. She was alive in the Abbey. She was alive everywhere you moved.
Yeah,
Hazel was there. Yeah. Everything was Hazel. You went into theatre, there was all the pictures of her. Even when in the village hall, there was all the contraptions that she used to make films.
The daughter was in the theatricals, you see. She had her own stage and all the villagers was involved. And then the Colonel shouting out, 8 o'clock, the film show. 8 o'clock, boys, in the theatre, the film show. That was made by Hazel Fennell, the daughter. I can remember a bird, a pigeon, with a piece of paper in its mouth, flying to the lily pond. I remember a rampart lion of St George, is it? Rampart lions on their tunics galloping. I remember that, and lances and that. But that's only misty mind that I can't really put anything to it. The old Colonel and Colonel Ailey used to come in, and we had to choose a horse. So Frank always claimed Colonel Fennell, and I had Colonel Ailey's shoulders. So there we would be, galloping all round the room and over the beds. And the idea was to dismantle Frank, or he had to dismantle me. They was like kids themselves, you know. And I mean, they was getting on. They was quite oldly, but they'd be jumping over the beds, and me and Frank, we wasn't far off the ceiling, you know. And there we'd be fighting, and they wouldn't fall over. And they would be dragging and pulling. It used to take ages. Yeah, they was in. I think they got more fun out of it than we did. Yeah, they really enjoyed it. Of course, we'd all end up on the bed, and time when Dad was exhausted, and of course crash down on the bed, and they would all be laughing. Yeah, it's nice. Nice.
Our butler, Mills, in the pub, better than...
I love that, I love that.
that
For 6 years you could say that.
Our boys, his boys, was better at catching rabbits.
And we're all sitting down there waiting for the meal, weren't we? 21 of us. The footman, the animal boy, the maid.
But that's one thing that Frank couldn't do, was eat his greens. And there'd be like a big table, and Miss Jordan be looking over her glasses, and Mills liked Frank so much that if Miss Jordan happened to get up to do something, he'd pick Frank's plate up, scrape the greens onto his plate, put it back in before the housekeeper got back. But if she didn't get up and she was there looking, she'd go like that. And there's good little Jim eating me greens and everything. Bobby, Charlie, all eating out. But Frank, no. So she'd get up. She'd come round with her knife. She had a lovely knife. It was a yellow Sheffield. It was beautiful, very palatable, you know, squashy one, you know. She used to squash all the greens, get the potatoes, squash it over, scoop the gravy up over it, squash it. And she'd lay the knife down, get this fork, put her arm round Frank. There's me sitting there, ettle mine, not a cuddle, nothing. And there she's, come on, Frank. And he's saying no, and he's loving it. He's getting a cuddle, and there's me. I thought, hello, I've got to think about this. So I went on strike, didn't I? I said, no, I'm not eating my greens. No. So, of course, what happens? Out comes the squashy knife, boom, 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 boom. Down comes the cuddle. So I done it. It's always a way of solving the problem. So there I was getting the first cuddle for months, you know. Because she couldn't really show a lot of affection, but I think that was the way she got. So she's put her arm around you, and the way she just squashed the cabbage and the potatoes and the gravy. Oh, dear.
Ah, Christmas, that was one. Roast turkey and all the trimmings, and one of the maids dressed up as Father Christmas. We all knew who she was, but only Jimmy, you know, said to her, I know who you are, you're not Father Christmas, you're Gwen. And, oh, the presents. Brush and comb sets in the leather cases.
Yeah.
Watches, we had fob watches.
The toys, wasn't it? The toys what we got, wasn't it? Was out of this world, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And now they've got friends coming in and they're asking us, you know, like, we're happy and all, we're crying though because Mum and Dad ain't there. They said, well, what sort of Christmas did you up in London? We never had nothing. Do you remember? So they said, well, tell me, Robert, what sort of presents you got? I said, well, at school, you had to pay twopence to go in to the party. Now, twopence was a lot of money. Mum never had that, see. So you go in. Now, I've wrote, they give you a piece of paper like a week before Christmas to write what you wanted. Well, in Bottoms is the toy shop at Blackwall Tunnel. Was a box that big with 6 soldiers on horseback. I loved it. Oh, you know, every time I look at them. So I wrote for them. I wanted a box of soldiers. Folded it up, give it to the teacher, and she put it in the fire. And when it blew up, I'm going to get a box of soldiers, isn't it? Comes the day, sitting on the floor, Father Christmas comes down. It's me, Robert Burns. And as good as my judge, I'll try and think of a thing. Now this. They give me a little thing, a piece like that with a wrapped up. I looked at it and it's got my name on it, Robert Burns. It's a plink plonk. Now you don't know what a plink plonk is, you remember? You don't know what a plink plonk is. If you got this little wooden handle and you turned it, it went plink plonk, plink, and if you turn it backwards, it went plunk plink. I don't want this. And I threw it at Father Christmas. Well, they was in fits at the Abbey, weren't they?
Juliet, yeah, no. Oh, that's another one, that is, with a tablecloth and a knickers, wasn't it?
So the Blitz at its heights. So that's when Mum came to live at the Abbey.
That was Mum and Dad. And he, you know, I could feel for him, you know, because he was, what was there, you know, the splendour and all the rest of it, he was awestruck. You know, I mean, even to eating meals, you know, he took his coat off, which we do, don't we? Yeah, you don't, but there you dress for your meal. You put your coat on. He took his coat off and hung it on the back of the chair like, you know, and you know, afterwards we told him, you know, the etiquette, like that you leave your coat on, you don't take your coat off, you know. So he never came down too often, you know. I don't think he couldn't handle it, you know. But Mum used to come down and she got into the swing of it. Mind you, she was still awestruck.
She lived in the far end of the house in a little attic room, and she stayed in that room most of the time. And because she was a bit embarrassed, because she did take snuff, and sometimes it would run, because where Dad had broke her nose, she lost control of because her nose was like bent over, you know. But she used to say, Jim, how do I look? I say, wipe your nose, Mum, wipe your nose, Mum.
The old man's beat Mum up and he'd give her a cup of tea. Now, don't forget he's stoned out of his mind. She took the cup out of his hand, and if you see him in his box, she hit the old man across the face with this cup. He did, smashed in his face. Went out and it's bleeding. He got, not salt, he got 2, because he rolled his own, he got 2 cigarette papers, pepper, and stuck it on and went to work. Her Uncle Charlie tells me, and what was that with the old man? Well, he was with him, you know. He said, we're working on sugar and he's spitting up blood. I went, pulled out a lump of cup, as a cup in his mouth. He went to in his box with that scar, yeah. He was an hard man.
He was Jack the lad while he was in the pub. Everybody loved him, you know. But when the bell went for drink up time, then his personality changed. But when I look back, I thought, well, supposing you was the old man, and indoors is waiting for you is 8 or 9 kids. Where would you go? Would you go in that pub, or would you go in that rat hole? I don't know what I would do. When they used to have the hunts, and then there'd be all these pheasants with beautiful colours in the green grass. All colours, all dripping blood from their mouths. Hundreds of them, all laying out on the grass. I started having nightmares. And I had a terrible nightmare. And I was sick in the night, and Bobby said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Rats. I've got rats running all over me bed, Bob." He said, it's a eiderdown, it's a quilted eiderdown. Look, that's what you're seeing and feeling. Well, you best get in my bed. I said, "Can I?" "Yeah, come and done." Right, so I'm in Bobby's bed now. Doze up asleep. And all of a sudden, this rat, I'm screaming. He's, "What's the matter?" I said, "The rat's on me bed." He said, "Where?" I said, I've got it. He said, "Where?" I said, "I've got it in my hand, I've got the rat." And he said, "Well, let the thing go." And I let go, and I never had another fear in my life.
I started to work in the Abbey, you know. I was the animal boy. All them animals was mine. Horses, cows, kangaroo, the deer, the geese, the pigeons, the ducks, peacocks, they was mine. In the end, the old estate was mine. I was doing what the Colonel would. I'd have a 20-bore shotgun under my arm, a Labrador dog, my bag for the catch, and pocket full of shells, like. And I never shot nothing. I just couldn't bring myself to use it on them. And then there's looking down on the Abbey from the park, autumn time. Had ivy growing up it, and it was scarlet in the autumn, the whole side of it. It looked like it was alive. We're coming back pulling our sledges, and that was Tinsel Land. And there was the Abbey, you know, sparkling, and that big tree, it was my favourite tree. It's evergreen oak, because it looked like a giant cauliflower, all sparkling, you know, and the crunch as you're walking through the snow. Talk about winter wonderland, we had it all there. Worlds apart. And then the war ended. That was it. So on the train at Oxford, going back, and it's the reverse again, isn't it? The green fields, cars, the sooty black buildings as you're pulling into Paddington, and the dust, the dirt.
Then we're getting down into Aldgate, down Commercial Road. The shops are getting dingier and bombed and boarded up, and my heart began to sink. Couldn't believe it. Then we got off and we walked down, what was down that road? Robin Hood Lane. Yeah. Walked down there and it was dusky, evening, darkish, and in the silhouette of Alberta House. And the tide must have gone out from the Thames, and that stunk. The oil and filth on the riverbed. Up the concrete stairs, nobody in. Yeah, and there was that same bit of string full of grease and dirt that had been there when we left, with the key on the end. And that was it. We was home. How we was going to survive, I don't know.
Back again, all in one bed. And start to get on with life again, you know. Same with Mum and Dad. They had to... but he sussed I wasn't happy. I've come home, I've said to Mum and Dad, Mr Mills wants me to go back. He'd get me a job. I want to go back. Now, this is this hard man that you're talking about. He knew I was unhappy. He took me up the other end, down Oxford Street, to the amusement arcades, to all the sites, to Trafalgar Square. He spent all day with me up in London. That's an hard man that you were talking about.
Oh,
he knew.
How many times did you do that, yeah?
Once. Well, no, but this is the man that you're saying is hard. He knows that I'm suffering. I want to go back. He knew I was heartbroken. And that man see it. This is this hard man that you're talking about.
Who's hard man?
Everyone's
he said
got
to
another
me,
side to it. Yeah.
But he said to me, he said,
Especially
what do you
younger
reckon of it?
children.
I didn't like what I saw, but I said to him, great Dad. He said, do you want to go back? I said, no, this is it. Because he'd lost us for 6 years, right? He said that he wanted to do something for me, to find something there that he could offer. This is that old man.
Mum used to tell me that she used to sit, once they'd all gone, and she used to sit in her chair, favourite chair, and she used to fall asleep, and she used to think that they were all had their heads on her lap, and she used to sit and think that she had her hands and cuddling them. And yes, she missed them dreadfully.
Well, I was really confused. I tried everything. I tried, everything. A butcher's boy. And he accused me of nicking 2 kidneys out of a lamb, and I didn't. I got a sack from him. And this fella came up, Johnny Cable, and he was fit and tanned, and I said, what do you do, John? Because I think 6pence was a sarsaparilla. He bought me a sarsaparilla. I said, what do you do, John? He said, I'm a lagger's mate. I said, what's that? He said, you just travel around the country. He said, you get lodgings. He said, before you unpack your suitcase, you're in bed with the landlady. I said, is that right? He said, I thought, bloody hell, I'll have some of this. So I phoned up this firm and said, yeah, when do you want to start? And then, boom, I was in the asbestos industry. And that's where I've been since, yeah. When I think of the wealth that I lived in for them 5 years, and then coming back and getting the Catholic religion off me back, I started to question, and I joined the Communist Party. I went on marches, and Maureen used to come on the marches, Vietnam marches, and old age pensioners marching, Lumumba. I fought in the campaign to make asbestos recognised as a killer. I was everywhere, That was that anger that I felt there wasn't any justice, and I knew that when I walked through that door of Alberta House with the greasy string down here, that I wasn't going to accept. I was going to fight. So I did.
It just wasn't to be. So then along come Maureen, and yeah. She was a friend of my sister's, Arlene. They was mad brains, weren't they, 3 of them. She had a little dog, little whippet. The dog would come flying in first, and then morning had come flying in, like, you know, because she was as fast as a whippet. Oh, dear old Lord, not you lot again. It's been quite fiery, hasn't it, darling? Eh? I think she still loves me. Yeah. We've had some hurdles to climb, but we've managed it. Ah, well, my health, I mean, oh, dear. Spondylitis, lumbago fibrositis they called it, but it was quite a few years before they diagnosed it as ankylosing spondylitis. Some pain. Your spine is fusing together gradually. So she's had to live with that. Then we had Roy. He suffered brain damage at birth. He could react to light and dark music. I was sent away for some classicals, you know, because I couldn't stand that pop lark, like, you know, and Reader's Digest, you know, quite Hawaiian music, gypsy rhapsodies and what have you, Chopin. And if I put one of them on, that was it. He'd cry, scream, and I'd have to take it off. But you put Shakin' Stevenson on, ABBA, you know, and he reacted to that, to the music. He could recognise my car. I had a Cortina estate then. And he'd recognise it, the engine, and he'd start getting excited. And coming through the back gate, he'd hear the back gate go, and his arms and legs, there's no coordination, they'd be right erratic, and they'd be all over the place, and they'd nearly come off the settee. And I used to sing him a song, I like a nice cup of tea, because as soon as I get in, it's a cup of tea, isn't it, for Dad? Like a nice cup of tea in the morning, and he'd really go. Terrific. Yeah. But he was handsome. You've got the deer park on the right hand side, and it's down in, the abbey's down in the valley. And it's, you know, beautiful nights. The stars was millions of them, you know. And I'm walking down and I'm looking at the stars, and suddenly it seemed as if I've come out of my body and I'm up amongst the stars. And I'm looking down, you know, at the abbey, and oh, wonderful feeling. It's like a floating feeling, you know. I don't know whether they call it ecstasy or what, like. I was up there amongst them stars looking down at the abbey. Yeah. I'm up there now.